My name is Greta Thunberg. I'm 16 years old. I come from Sweden, and I want you to panic.
How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Christian, and this is Liberty After Dark. And I wanted to come at you guys because I've been looking at doing an episode on climate change, probably this coming up weekend. And it just so happens that while I was asleep before I woke up in the morning, the delightfully entertaining Greta Thunberg, as I believe you pronounce that last name, Vikings, who knows really, went up and gave quite a few talks. I missed the one that she gave to, it was very short, but I missed what she gave to Congress. I didn't hear about any of the stuff that she did in the EU. However, what I will say is that I watched her latest UN talks, and I think that was pretty interesting stuff, honestly. I think interesting is a good way of putting it. So I will be going a lot more into climate change this weekend because I've decided that that is probably the most appropriate topic for this coming up episode. I've wanted to do climate change. I've wanted to talk about it, what the libertarian perspective is, etc., blah, blah, blah. But I wanted to take some time specifically to talk about Greta today, to talk about what is happening here, why it's happening. And some of this stuff, if you're not very intimate with climate change science, may seem a bit esoteric, may seem a bit like insider trade talk. But I think for the most part, this is all very followable stuff if you've really even kept remotely up with climate change. So we're not gonna stay too long on this. I just want to play a couple of clips from Greta and talk about some of the things she said that really were what caused the most concern for me in particular. And then we'll go ahead and press with getting on with the rest of our lives.
Around the year 2030, 10 years, 259 days, and 10 hours away from now, we will be in a position where we set off an irreversible chain reaction that will most likely lead to the end of our civilization as we know it. That is, unless in that time, permanent and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society have taken place, including a reduction of our CO2 emissions by at least 50%. And please note that these calculations are depending on inventions that have not been yet invented at scale. Inventions that are supposed to clear our atmosphere of astronomical amounts of carbon dioxide. Furthermore, do these calculations not include unforeseen tipping points and feedback loops, like the extremely powerful methane gas escaping from rapidly thawing Arctic permafrost? Nor do they include already locked-in warming hidden by air pollution, nor the aspect of equity or climate justice clearly stated throughout the Paris Agreement, which is absolutely necessary to make it work on a global scale. We must also bear in mind that these are just calculations, estimations. That means that these points of no return may occur a bit sooner or later than that. No one can know for sure.
So she brings up multiple times, like you just saw, this study that came out that talks about the 67% chance of reverting from what is considered the climate tipping point, the 1.5 degrees Celsius across the entire planet. She talks about how much these statistics are changing. I think it's very pertinent what and where and why she's talking about these changes. A report just came out not too long ago, which I'll post up here probably really quick or put over the screen in front of you, talks about how the US and the EU combined produce less carbon emissions than China. Now, China has been doing really fantastic efforts to reduce their carbon emissions, and this is not to say that we all can't be doing better, but the idea that calling on the first world armada to fix the problems of modern day climate change is not a realistic one. Industrializing and urbanizing areas are the most susceptible to producing extremely large amounts of CO2. And it doesn't just involve CO2 either. Notice that she makes a distinction multiple times in these talks between things like soil erosion, things like ocean pollution, things like toxic pollution from vehicles, like things like your smogs, your carcinogenic gases that are being released by vehicles and trains and coal plants and stuff like that, that go outside of just CO2, carbon monoxide, ozone, all of these different ideas, or all these different byproducts of chemical processes that we use every day, whether we're making products out of it or expending it for energy. There's somewhere along the line we are burning something and something is coming out of it that is typically not very good for us. I mean, great example is fuels like hydrazine. They have some of the most carcinogenic substances on planet Earth in them. And it could kill you on contact with it, especially, and once it's burned, yeah, it'll definitely, being anywhere near it. Oh, and once it's begun to burn, being anywhere near it is basically a death sentence. So that's definitely something to, we have to be honest about and keep in mind. But we always have to frame this from the perspective of what's being asked. What is Greta asking of us? Greta is asking us to change completely the way that the entire world operates. And unfortunately, if the US and the EU cut carbon emissions completely, which are really the only two places on planet Earth that could ever remotely afford to come anywhere close to that. Maybe if we made an incredible amount of sacrifices, we could cut carbon emissions across the US and the EU by 75% in the next 10 years. Incredible number of sacrifices, incredible, I can't even put into words how much that would take from us. But if both of us did that, we could make it out of it relatively all right. However, if you look at developing countries, which China is still to this day a developing nation, or you look at places like India, or you look at places in the Middle East that are still developing, or you look at places in Africa, and you start imposing these very stringent carbon restrictions on these places, and we're talking about killing countries before they're even really born. Some of these places are just now getting into the international economic markets and are producing goods. Imagine if Taiwan and China had these stringent guidelines put onto them to where they had to have completely clean manufacturing facilities. It would kill their economies. It would kill their economies to the point that they would essentially be completely inoperable on the global economic markets. And that's not acceptable. I mean, we talk about how many hungry, starving, dying people we're going to have from climate change. Destroying economies and entire manufacturing sectors is going to create a bunch of hungry, starving, dying people. And that's not an acceptable answer. So saying we have to change now can be completely true, but saying that the solutions that we have are unacceptable is also completely true. So I want to get that out there. Let's play one more clip.
The future, as well as what we have achieved in the past, is literally in your hands now. But it's still not too late to act. It will take a far-reaching vision. It will take courage. It will take fierce determination to act now, to lay the foundations where we may not know all the details about how to shape the ceiling. In other words, it will take cathedral thinking. I ask you to please wake up and make the changes required possible. To do your best is no longer good enough. We must all do the seemingly possible.
That quote right there, laying down the foundations without knowing how to shape the ceiling right there, is the perfect example of exactly what I was talking about, of this idea of the hard, why there's so much hard pushback towards so many of these ideas. We have solutions. We have solutions. We have things like the Green New Deal. These are things that realistically could work, possibly. If we implemented them, they would most likely have the intended effects. They probably wouldn't be quite as good as to be expected. But if we implemented the Green New Deal, U.S. carbon emissions would go through the floor. Obviously, they would drop tremendously. At what cost? Okay, that ceiling is important, all right? If you build a foundation that is so complicated that you can never build a ceiling in the first place, what do you do when it rains? Well, we have a great foundation. It's beautiful. It's made of marble, and it's got everybody's name inscribed on it and how much they love this idea, and we all put tons of money towards it, but we don't have a roof or a ceiling, and now it's raining. So I guess we'll just all have to what? Would you flood yourself out? Obviously, this is an analogy. I'm not talking specifically about any climate change instance here, but this is the kind of mentality that is operating. You know, I'm sure if you haven't yet, watch the entire video. She talks multiple times about weaponizing fear. I want you to act as if the house is on fire. I want you to be afraid. I want you to panic. We can't be doing that. We're not talking about something that is as easy as, oh my gosh, well, I got to pay my bills. And then you run over and pay your bills. That's not how this works. We're talking about restructuring the entire way that the planet operates. I can't remember exactly what interview it was, but I remember she was talking about flying, and she was talking about the massive impact that flying has on the environment. And that's super true. Planes are very, very costly as far as a carbon emissions standpoint is concerned. Flying is the reason that the 21st century society exists. Flying is the reason. Being able to airlift cargo, being able to reach entire other sides of the planet in hours, being able, the internet is great, but the internet can't ship goods across literally oceans in hours. The guys, like, we don't have to put things on a boat for 3 weeks anymore if they aren't, the size of cars, or if they don't, if you need to transport them quickly. Next day delivery, gone. Probably most places 7-day delivery, gone, because you have to travel by vehicle. And I bet you they're going to be electric vehicles. So all of those 8-hour trips that people are taking in their cars that they have now for the mail, I just don't see this as being any of these being acceptable outcomes. I'm sorry. Like, if you're talking about enforcing a standard of life on me against my will, which is what all of this is coming to, those are not terms that I find to be acceptable. And really, that's what I wanted to get to last. We'll just get straight into it. Every single bit of everything she says is under the threat of popular violence. I mean, the things that she says are not very cooperative. Let's just put it that way. Like, she's obviously fed up. She's obviously wants the people to make change. I'm not saying she wants violence, but she obviously wants some sort of massive change inside of the system. And she wants to use that system to create her ideal results. Now, what that is using the power of government, the violence inherent inside of government, to control the people. And I don't care how good your intentions are, guys. That's not okay. She can be the most right person. She probably is right, honestly. I'm going to spoil a little bit of the global warming episode. She probably is right. She probably is right that in the next 8 years will be the last time we ever have a chance to go back on 1.5 degrees Celsius. She probably is right that will have a lot of impacts on the ecosystems of the world. She probably is right that there are going to be negative repercussions from this. She probably is right that eventually sea levels will rise and that other chain reactions and what they call positive feedback loops in ecosystems will follow. But you can't perpetrate violence on other people to get what you want, especially when there is a lot of contentious topics about these sorts of things. Most of the things that she says probably are true and most likely will happen sooner rather than later. But is it true that we only have 8 years to do this? Maybe. That's fine. We can take 8 years to figure out an acceptable solution. Maybe we won't hit that 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold. If we can spend the next 8 years figuring out a way to stop before 2 degrees or 1.8 degrees and not completely trash modern economic systems in doing so, I will take that. I will. And what I will be told is that even though I'm someone who lives in a coastal city that's affected by hurricanes, is that I am a person of privilege speaking from this perspective, and that if I was XYZ person, I wouldn't have feel the same way. That's fine. You can hold that line of logic. You can take that line of reasoning and run as far as you'd like into the sunset with it. However, that is not at all the case from my perspective. From my perspective, looking at this from the entire world, everyone loses immediately if we run in and we do these Green New Deals, these climate change plans, these modern proposals for what we need to do for the next 8 years. Everybody loses. The only people who win are the people who don't, in theory, die. I'm not saying that we have to completely, all right, we got to give up on climate. Like, nope, that's it. Everything has to stay the same. Nothing changes. Everything has to stay the same. Solar cells are getting remarkably better at being carbon neutral. Wind farms are pretty garbage. Geothermal energy is remarkably good at being a carbon positive energy source. Can we do that all over the place? No. There are even designs for hydroelectric generators that exist out in the ocean and are so electrically positive it would blow your minds because they operate off of waves, and waves come and go, yes, but they are always out there, always doing their job, and they're remarkably simple structures to build. Great ideas. Putting smaller helical wind turbines on the tops of buildings in areas that get lots of wind, great ideas. Putting the more cost efficient and energy efficient solar collectors on new houses. I mean, these advanced solar cells that we're building are so much better than they were 10, 15 years ago than a lot of these studies were done. We've gotten remarkably better at capturing the energy from the sun. It's still not like a lossless procedure by any means, but they do contribute towards a greener America. Nuclear power needs to come back for a perfect example. Is it perfectly green? No. Is it 20 times better than anything else that we have right now? Yes. Actually, I'd say 30 to 40 times better. It's an amazing energy source that we have to use. And until we create fusion power, we're always going to have this issue of energy demand. And as much as I love the idea of a quote unquote cold fusion being possible sometime in our lifetimes, I'm extremely skeptical of that. So really that's what this all comes down to, is that yes, there are things we can do. Whether you think electrical vehicles are carbon positive or not, that's a conversation for Thursday. But drive your electric cars, install solar panels in your house, put energy efficient grids down whenever you're building your home. Put your home on an automatic sensor so that you can, whenever you're not home, it automatically turns off the power and stuff like that. These are all options that you can do to decrease your carbon footprint. Should you do them? Sure. If you care about the environment, you should do them, in my opinion. Will any of these things help? Maybe a little bit. Maybe, it's better than nothing, right? Should you be mandated by gunpoint that you have to do these things? No. I'm going to say no on that one, Home Slice. Just like I don't think you should be mandated at gunpoint to fight for, the survival of the human species against the alien empire. If you don't want to do that, that's up to you. Now, obviously, we're talking ethics, and we get ethics and politics and science and all these things mixed in the same pot, and people turn pretty authoritarian pretty quickly. But I didn't want to take up too much of your time, guys. I just wanted to highlight a couple sections from this video and kind of give some context for what we're going to be talking about on Thursday. I think I said Saturday earlier in this video. Trisha Stewart has been pushed from Wednesday to Saturday, so we will get to see her on Saturday live. And we'll be talking about climate change on Wednesday, especially with these current events. I figured now is probably the best time to do so, and it'll be great. I mean, I'm sure there will be a lot of people who disagree with things I have to say. I've had numerous climate change debates inside of the online groups that I'm a part of, but I'm pretty sure I stand from a very strong intellectual position from what I talk about. So I hope you guys enjoy, and you enjoyed this little YouTube short thing that I did. So I will go ahead and catch you guys later. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, etc. And check out the Patreon if you haven't yet. Take it easy.